Let's start with Russia. For the first time since the Cold War, we have a regime in Russia that directly challenges the core values of Western liberal democracy. And on this issue, I see the United States and the Czech Republic as strong partners, at least on the key principles. Borders cannot be redrawn at the barrel of a gun. Might does not make right. Appeasement does not pay. Together, we are going to impose a cost on Russia for its aggression, and together we will counter falsehoods with truth. But we also need to pay attention to worrying trends inside of Russia regarding the government's crackdown on civil society, free speech, and dissent. We will speak out when dissidents are silenced, and we will provide support where we can. Now, economic sanctions are an important part of the strategy, not as a policy in and of themselves, but as a tool to convince Russia to adhere to international law. And make no mistake, the sanctions are working. We can see direct and indirect impacts on Russia's economy and its most prominent companies. Foreign investors already are increasingly staying away. Experts predict that over $100 billion in capital will flee Russia this year, and their projections of Russia's economic growth have declined to almost zero. As a result, Russia's central bank has raised interest rates 3 times, all the way up to 8%, to fight inflation at the expense of economic growth. The ruble has fallen around 20% against the dollar so far this year. And since early October, the Russian central bank has spent over $13 billion in foreign reserves to support it. So don't let anyone tell you that sanctions aren't having an impact. And don't let anyone shrug and turn away if over the first weeks or month or two you don't see immediate pain, because it's already being felt. But even if the impact were not readily measurable, we must stand together on sanctions, and we must stand firm. Of course, there is some pain associated with imposing sanctions. The United States understands that we can't ask our allies to take losses for sanctions if we're not willing to do so ourselves. We have felt it in the US, and you have felt it as well. But I was very heartened to see over the last few weeks that Czech businesses and Czech citizens, like their counterparts in America, are willing to accept some sacrifice in support of these greater principles. I read an October 16th poll conducted for the Czech news agency that reported that almost 70% of Czech businesses consider sanctions against Russia as the right course of action in support of democracy. Another recent poll says that 65% of Czechs believe Russia to be a threat to their country in the future. This is an increase of 29% since last year, and it's the first time in 15 years that the percentage has risen above 50%. So those who make decisions about the course of the nation, I believe, should feel heartened that they're not getting ahead of their citizens, and they're not getting ahead of their business people. In fact, it seems here to me that the citizens and the business people might actually be in the vanguard and be ahead of the government. Ultimately, we want to maintain Europe whole, free, and at peace. And that is something that you helped achieve in the Velvet Revolution. And so we must remain steady, we must keep our nerve, and I am convinced that together we will do so. Now, in the Middle East, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, as it is sometimes called, represents a serious challenge to our most basic core values, and a clear and grave threat not just to the Middle East, but to the entire world. A United Nations report in August documented the mounting abuses and gruesome violations committed by ISIL, including mass killings, rape, torture, public executions. ISIL has demonstrated that it will target any group, violate any norm, attacking even moderate Sunnis who might disagree with its goals, by committing atrocities, violations of international and humanitarian law, human rights abuses, and horribly violent acts. ISIL has imposed brutal sentences such as stoning, lashing, reportedly crucifixion. This is a movement that has proudly taken credit for the abduction, enslavement, rape, and forced marriage and sale of several thousand women and girls, some as young as 12 years old. These crimes transgress all definitions of human dignity, and we cannot stand by and refuse to get involved, no matter how complicated the politics or the military situation may appear. Now, on this issue, I am pleased to say that our cooperation with the Czech Republic is excellent. The Czech Republic's recent contribution of ammunition to the Kurd Peshmerga fighters in northern Iraq demonstrated Czech resolve and a willingness to stand with the US and the coalition against ISIL, and we thank you, and you should be proud. It is also clear that we are on the same page in terms of principles. We must work together against such atrocities. Those responsible must be held accountable, and we all must resist unlawful aggression. On a happier note, let's talk about trade and commerce for a moment. 25 years ago, the Czech economy required the same drastic transformation as Czech political institutions. And the process of moving to a market-based economy was not always smooth, but a tremendous transformation has taken place in a very short period of time. In economic and business matters, our partnership is easy to see. Annual bilateral trade between the United States and the Czech Republic is over $6 billion and has nearly doubled since 2009. The U.S. is the Czech Republic's second largest trading partner outside of the European Union, and most of this trade consists of products with high value-added content, including nuclear power plant components, automobiles and parts, and high-precision equipment. The United States is also a very large investor in the Czech Republic. U.S. entities have invested over $5 billion since 1993. And I'm also pleased to see that the Czech government is a strong supporter of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or sometimes called TTIP. TTIP offers the United States and the Czech Republic a tremendous opportunity to increase our bilateral trade by reducing tariffs, and more critically, by eliminating non-tariff barriers to trade. TTIP will improve intellectual property protections, ensure that regulations to protect health and safety are based on sound science, and perhaps most critically, will essentially allow the United States and the EU to set the rules of global trade. A comprehensive free trade agreement could add billions of dollars to the GDP of both the United States and the EU and reduce costs to consumers here and throughout the EU. Now, as we all know, corruption is an economic drain on societies wherever it occurs. But it's more than that. If unchecked, corruption also undermines the institutions that governments need to function well and to be responsive to the needs of all citizens. Well, we've seen this in Ukraine, where corruption tore apart the very fabric of society and and eroded trust in government, including at the very top of the government. Now, fighting corruption remains a challenge in both the United States and the Czech Republic. Government officials need to be held accountable for their wrongdoing, and if found guilty, they should be punished. And in fact, since 1970, I was amazed when I saw this statistic, approximately 25,000 elected officials in the United States have been convicted of corruption. So what does that say? It says, on the one hand, we are in no position to preach and to say that we don't have the same problems, but it's also an issue that we have some experience wrestling with ourselves. And one of the things we've learned is that to successfully battle corruption, a nation must have an independent judiciary, free of any outside influence, independent prosecutors, and an effective police force. The United States is committed to working with Czech officials to strengthen these capacities through training and seminars for judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement officers. Also essential is transparent public procurement. We look forward to the final implementation of new laws on this and related issues, and we remain hopeful that they will achieve their intended purpose. But these laws are not the only step needed in the fight against corruption. Yet without such a framework, it's harder to combat corruption in general. So we plan to redouble our collaboration with Czech NGOs to combat corruption and to promote the rule of law and transparency. And to that end, early next year, I will announce a specific grant program, a competition aimed at supporting Czech civil society in this valuable and crucial work of fighting corruption, working for good government and transparency. Now, allow me to turn back to my initial thesis and my initial point. That is, the case for our extraordinary bond, or if you're comfortable using the term, our special relationship. I think it's fair to say that after the Velvet Revolution, there was a period of giddiness in the wake of the Velvet Revolution. And in the early 1990s, hundreds of Americans showed up in Prague, from students to actors. They were in every cafe trying to write their novels. They were entrepreneurs. They were Peace Corps volunteers. And from the summer of 1990 until the mid-1990s, there were tens of thousands of Americans living in the Czech Republic, mostly here in Prague. And they shared some of their experiences, their knowledge, and their lives with local residents. And Czechs from every walk of life inspired these Americans with their exuberant embrace of their newfound freedoms. It was as if the cork had been popped from the bottle of champagne, and the pressure, the bubbles, and the verve came pouring out. And those relationships helped to facilitate the nearly 10,000 Americans working, studying, and living in the Czech Republic today. Meanwhile, through programs such as Fulbright grants, we've had excellent experience in people-to-people diplomacy, also through the International Visitors Leadership Program, similar programs of bringing Czechs to the United States to meet us, to work with us, to learn from us, and also to teach us. And I think if we cast our minds back now, 25 years to just before the Velvet Revolution, I don't know if any of us could have imagined the things that were to come. Despite the fading, perhaps, of that initial burst of giddiness, look at where we are today. Not only is the Czech Republic a strong NATO partner, but who would have imagined that a Czech general would be the chairman of an important NATO committee, or that US-Czech bilateral trade, which back at the time of the Velvet Revolution was virtually non-existent, would be now worth more than $6 billion, or that the Czech market would be one of the fastest growing markets for US investors, or that we would move from virtually no movement of people between our countries to hundreds and thousands of educational and professional exchanges each year. And when I cast my vision ahead to the US-Czech relationship 25 years from now, I see a powerful transatlantic alliance. I see a Czech Republic that is an anchor of democracy and stability in the center of Europe, and I see a Czech Republic that is a strong contributor to NATO. And yes, I see a Czech Republic that is a moral authority, taking courageous stands to speak out for the voiceless. President Havel wrote in the early 1990s that if Czechoslovakia enjoys the respect it does in the world, then it is due, among other things, to the kind of basic decency and humanity with which communism was overthrown here and the moral direction of our foreign policy. And while times have changed, the validity of that message has not. Now, I realize that the young, of whom Daniel spoke, many of whom, as he said, don't remember 1989, let alone 1968 or 1938. The young aren't going to feel the strength of this special bond or the importance of speaking out on these issues just by reading history textbooks. It doesn't work that way. We have to show them, and the people in this room have to show them, and all of us who are leaders have to show them. And we're fully capable of doing that because the Czech Republic has well-developed, institutionally admired approaches for advancing human rights, supporting democracy, and assisting states in transition. It has very well-qualified people, both within the government and in civil society, with significant experience and high levels of credibility. And this hard-earned respect of the international community is a potent tool that Czechs can continue to use to build a better, safer, more stable world with us and for all of us. I believe that the Czech Republic will do so, and that the United States will stand shoulder to shoulder with you in that endeavor. So, once again, I want to thank AMO and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm very pleased to have had this opportunity to talk about the strong partnership between the United States and the Czech Republic and the importance of values and ideals in shaping national priorities. So I look forward to spending the rest of tonight's conversation, for which I will probably sit down, the rest of tonight's conversation in question and answers, and discussing any of these topics as you wish. Thank you.